In order to ensure digital transformation success, there's a number of things and warning signs you should be looking for. I'm going to talk about what those top warning signs are for digital transformation success here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. And one of my favorite songs from the 1980s is a song called Canary in a Coal Mine by the Police. And not only is it a great song, but it's a great analogy that applies to digital transformations. The analogy of a canary in the coal mine is that miners used to use canaries to identify when there was a gas leak. The canaries would be singing until they smelled gas and died, and that would be the warning sign to the miners that they needed to get out of the mine. And that's a lot like how digital transformations work. You need a canary in your coal mine as you're going through the digital transformation to identify those warning signs before you see them, because by the time you see and feel the warning signs and the pain of mistakes you might be making, typically it's too late and typically your transformation has already failed. You just don't realize it yet. So what I want to talk about today are those top warning signs that you should be thinking about as you go through your digital transformation. Now, the first warning sign that can derail any project, no matter how well you run it, is if your executive team is misaligned. If you have an executive team that isn't on the same page, doesn't have a clear vision of what this transformation means to your organization and what this transformation means to your organization's future goals and objectives, chances are very high that the project is going to fail. If your executives are not aligned on what they want to be when they grow up and what they want the organization to be when they grow up, it's unlikely that the project team and all the stakeholders and ultimately the employees that'll be using the technology and the new processes are going to be aligned as well. So it's key up front before you even start evaluating potential technology, or certainly while you're evaluating potential technology, to figure out what are those areas of alignment that you need to get with your executive team. And there's some YouTube videos that I put on my channel that cover this exact topic. I've also included some links below that cover this topic in more detail. But for this point and the purpose of this video, it's important to make sure you have executive alignment to ensure you don't run into trouble throughout your transformation. Another warning sign that can derail a lot of projects early on is a biased technology evaluation. So if you're relying on consultants or system integrators or vendors that are somehow compensated for what decisions you make, chances are very likely that they are recommending things to you that are not necessarily in your best interest. They're in their best interest and they're going to make more money off of that. So it's really important to have an unbiased decision-making process and framework and an objective view of what your options are, because that's ultimately what's going to determine whether or not your project is successful. And what we always tell clients is that you're not guaranteed success if you choose the right technology for your organization, but it at least gives you a chance to succeed. If you choose the wrong technology or the technology is not a good fit, you're doomed to fail. But choosing the right technology at least gives you a chance for success. And early in the process, you want to make sure you have an unbiased view of technology. And that's where independent, unbiased, technology agnostic third parties like our team at Third Stage can help as well. Another big problem that clients often run into or fall into is that they don't have a business case, a quantifiable business case for what this project should deliver to the organization. And too often organizations say that they're going to go through this project regardless of what the ROI is. It doesn't matter how much they have to spend, it doesn't matter what kind of benefits they do or don't get, because they know they need to replace their old technology and sticking with the status quo is not an option. That may be true, but if you don't have a business case to quantify what you expect your cost to be, to quantify what you expect your benefits to be and where you expect to get the benefits, chances are very high that your project is going to go off the rails because you don't have a clear vision of what you expect the benefits to be and how those quantifiable benefits might contribute to your success in the future. So even if you know you have to replace your current systems, even if you know there's already been approval internally and you have support internally to replace your technology, it's still extremely important to have a business case, because that's going to serve you very well from a project governance and overall vision and direction perspective longer term. Another common warning sign we see with digital transformation is jumping prematurely into the implementation once the technology decision is made. We often refer to this as cliff diving. We see it all the time where clients are super excited about the new technology. They've gone through this long, strenuous evaluation process. They see the vision and the possibilities of this new technology that they've decided upon, and momentum's high, excitement's high, they're ready to roll, and they just jump straight into their implementation without a clear plan, without a clear mobilization of resources, without a clear blueprint of what they want the operations to look like going forward. All those things need to be defined before you start bringing in the expensive technical implementation consultants, because if you don't do that, what happens is the meter starts running while you're trying to make decisions around what you want to be when you grow up. And what further compounds this problem is that system integrators and vendors contribute to the problem by fueling that momentum and excitement and encouraging organizations to just jump right in and start doing the technical implementation. When in fact, what's going to serve you the best is to back up and start with the business aspects of your transformation, define what your team's going to look like, what your project governance is going to be, what sort of internal competencies do you need to build to support the project, what should your business processes look like, what's your organizational change strategy and plan. All that stuff should be defined before you bring your system integrator in to start the technical implementation. So another warning sign to watch for is that whole phenomena of jumping straight into your technical implementation prematurely. Another common warning sign for digital transformation problems and failures is not having clear business requirements and not drawing a line in the sand that defines when you've completed your business requirements. Now, a lot of organizations today are falling into the trap of going with agile implementation methodologies. And the agile approach can work in some cases, but for many organizations, especially mid-sized or larger organizations, the agile approach can actually create a lot more problems than solve problems. And what I mean by that is agile will oftentimes encourage technical developers to start building stuff without having clear signed off requirements early on in the process. So one thing that's very important for large scale digital transformations is to make sure you have alignment on what your business requirements are, and just as importantly, what the priorities are for your business requirements. And you certainly want to make sure you've completed that step in the process before your system integrator goes and starts building technology, because otherwise you're going to be doing a lot of rework, you're going to be having misalignment with your system integrator, and your system integrator is going to end up building technology that doesn't necessarily align with what your needs are. So making sure that you have clear business requirements defined early up front is another critical component. Now, a really tricky warning sign that actually sounds like a great idea and in theory is a great idea, but has a definite dark side that a lot of companies don't plan for, is this whole concept of no customization. We're going to deploy the software and the technology the way it was built, off the shelf. We're going to change our business to fit the software. We're not going to customize the software to fit our business. And that's a good place to start. It's a good goal to set, but it's an unrealistic goal. And chances are very high that you are going to have to customize something. You're going to have to change the software in some ways that may not necessarily be the way the software was built. And if you're wondering why is that, why can't we just be disciplined and just stick with no customization? Think of it this way: if everyone in your industry did exactly what you do, why are you in business? How are you competing with your competitors, and what makes you different? So inevitably, every organization has some aspects of secret sauce or competitive advantages that the software doesn't do out of the box because it's unique to that organization and it makes them who they are and it makes them competitive. So when organizations go in with a no customization mentality and it's unrealistic, what ends up happening is you draw a line in the sand, you set your budget, you set your resourcing, you set your overall strategy and plan based on a faulty assumption. So where companies get into trouble is they halfway through a project realize they need to customize and they don't know what to do. They don't have a way to account for that. They didn't build any contingency into the plan or the budget. And so that's where a lot of companies get into trouble with the whole no customization expectation. Another area that a lot of companies get into trouble is organizations and teams that have an inadequate contingency budget. They don't have enough time and money set aside as buffer for the unknowns, the things that we don't know we're going to run into. The challenges we know are there, but we don't know what exactly they are, but we know we're going to run into them at some point. So organizations that are more successful know that they need to set aside a reserve of time and money that's not earmarked for anything, but it's to be used as needed as new things come up. So for example, we just talked about customization in the previous segment around how most organizations and teams end up needing to customize something. So customization oftentimes will get drawn from the contingency budget. So if you don't have a contingency budget, consider that a warning that you're probably not being realistic about your digital transformation strategy. Another common challenge is that organizations think that they're addressing the people side of the equation or the organizational change management side of the equation with training and communications, just basic end user training right before go live, basic newsletter and basic employee communications. If that's all you're doing from an organizational change perspective, that's a huge warning sign. You're not doing nearly enough to address the most important part of your transformation, which is the people or the organizational change side of things. So rather than focusing exclusively on training and communications, you should also be looking at things like change impact and organizational design, organizational readiness, a whole host of other activities. I've got videos on my YouTube channel that dive into that in more detail. But in general, it's important to recognize that training and communications is barely scratching the surface of what it is you'll need to make your transformation more successful. It always amazes me how low organizations set the bar for how they define success for their transformations, especially in cases where organizations are forced into an implementation either because their old system's no longer supported or they've outgrown it. Companies at those points typically just want to replace the old system and just do no harm. And companies that set the bar that low tend to miss those goals and underperform what they could be doing. So if your definition is to simply do a lift and shift and just replace your old technology, or as was the case in an example that I have from early in my career, I worked with a CEO who told me our only goal is just to get the thing up and running. And if those are your goals and those are the extent of your definitions of success, chances are you're going to succeed, partly because you've set the goal so low, but also partly because you're missing out on the entire point of digital transformation, which is to transform your business, not implement new technology. So if your definition of success is to just get the thing up and running or just to lift and shift and replace your old system, I'd encourage you to please look at other ways and higher goals that you can set for your transformation. Another warning sign to think about is if you don't have enough user acceptance testing or conference room pilots within your project plan. Now, a lot of times what happens is system integrators are focused on the work they need to do. They need to spend X amount of time and money designing the system, building the system, testing it, working out all the bugs. And typically what ends up happening is they set aside just a sliver of time for you, the client, to go do the user acceptance so that they can continue to complete their testing and ultimately go live with the software. And that timeline usually gets compressed, and usually there's not nearly enough time for user acceptance testing or conference room pilots, depending on what nomenclature you might be using. But the key here is that that piece of the puzzle and that piece of the transformation is super important, not only because it ensures that the technology is not only working, but that it's working for your business. It's also important from an organizational change perspective to ensure that other stakeholders are getting involved and getting their hands dirty, getting their fingerprints all over what the new processes and what the new workflows are going to look like. And inevitably, every time you go through a round of user acceptance testing, you're going to find things that don't quite work. They may work from a technical perspective. All the bugs may be worked out on the software side, but there may be misalignments with what you need the software to do or what you want the software to do from a business process perspective. So taking the time to make sure you have at least 3 rounds of user acceptance testing or conference room pilots is really important. And if you have the time and the patience and the budget to spend even more than 3 rounds, that's even more beneficial. So inadequate focus on user acceptance testing is another common warning sign that you'll want to watch for. So the final warning sign to be thinking about as you engage in your digital transformation is if you don't have a plan B or a backup plan. What happens if this project doesn't go well? What happens if go live is a disaster? What happens if you can't ship product or service your customers through the new system for a period of time? What is your contingency plan? Will you go back to the old system? Do you have a manual paper and pen or spreadsheet process you could fall back on? What is that plan? In as much as we want to say that if you've addressed all the other warning signs that we just talked about, as much as I'd like to say that you're 100% guaranteed success, there's still the chance that you do all those things and you still run into problems at go live. So no matter how remote that chance is, it's really important that you have a backup plan and a contingency plan. And ultimately, and in a perfect world, you'd have a very stringent go, no-go decision-making process that's unbiased. It's not your system integrator telling you that everything's fine, we should go live. It's an objective third party saying, no, you're not ready, and here's the risk, and here's the likelihood of that risk, and now let's make sure we fix that and mitigate that risk. So having a plan B can be mitigated, first of all, by having a stopgap or a way to make sure you catch the problem before you go live. But even then, once you go live, you want to make sure you have a clear backup plan or a contingency plan in case things don't go well. So much like a canary in the coal mine, what is your canary? And let's make sure we have a canary for you to pay attention to. Hopefully the canary doesn't die, but if it does, better the canary than you and your team and your entire organization. So independent third parties like Third Stage, our team is able to help provide that independent quality assurance and independent risk mitigation and management to help ensure that you've identified those risks. These are just a few of the most common ones we see, and I hope you found this information useful. I also encourage you to download some of the links I've included below, which provide more thought leadership and best practices that'll help you through your transformation. So I hope you have a great day, and we'll chat with you soon.